In history, we're learning about the Victorian era and the slave trade that was from the Americas to Britain, and how Britain profited from it.
We're also learning about how Britain manipulated India into taking all their valuables. So during the slave trade, Britain would take slaves from India to do their labor, and they would blackmail them to take their valuables, and they wouldn't let them get an education, build trains to get profit. So the country ultimately fell down because they couldn't earn any profit to benefit the country.
We also learned that the Britons wanted tobacco, sugar, tea, coffee and cotton because it was in high value at that time.
The Britons had a sweet tooth, so they would try to get their way. So they would be getting slaves from all around the world and then be trading it to the Americas to get profit, and so they could buy other items from other countries.
We also learned that Britain wanted the slaves from the Americas because they didn't know how to plant the crops that they wanted. But the slaves they took knew how to, so they could get the resources they needed.
In order to transport the slaves to Britain, they would have to go on a boat that would take them all the way to a place where they would be sold for high values, and on the boat they would be starved and dehydrated, and most of them would not survive.
In our first term, we were learning about children in the Victorian times and how they were treated and what they did.
They would be forced to work in factories to help the Industrial Revolution and Britain's profit. They would have to work every day for 18 hours, and they would be served not good food, and they'll be mistreated if they try to fight back against the co-workers of the place. Children would lose limbs in the factories when they would try to do their work, making the place very dangerous. And children would be sent there when their families could no longer work enough to support the funds for their house, the food that they eat.
We also learned that most or a lot of children did not survive during work because the work they did was dangerous, and the adults didn't.
Our years in HPAB, we've been learning about the Vikings, the Anglo-Saxons, and the Romans. And the Vikings were savage, brutal people who would kill all of their enemies without any hesitation. And the Romans would, first around, they would rule everybody, and they created a society, a hierarchy where whoever was the richest would stay at top, and then whoever was the poorest would work for the rich.
Throughout our years, we've been learning about the history of Britain and how it's evolved. So first it was the Romans, then the Anglo-Saxons, then the Vikings, and now we're learning about the Victorians.
We can build a timeline with this because so far in the past we've been learning about what's happened and how the society has been built up to what's happening now in the world.
All our learning in history throughout the years have showed us how Britain has developed from the past to the present, which we are now.
It gives us an understanding of what's been happening in the past and how many things have been made throughout the world's throughout what's been happening, and we can understand what's happening now and what's happened back then, so we can make a timeline on what's happening throughout Britain and the whole world as well.
In HPAB, we learn more and remember more. So in history, we are helped remembering the things that we have been taught by our retrieval that recaps back on things that we have learned. So we can remember what we did in the past lesson or week or year.
At the end of every unit, we do a recap on what we've learned in the lesson and possibly past lessons, so we can refresh our mind on what's happened in history and what's going to happen next.
In history, some things that also help us are the displays throughout the building that have our history books and history facts that were from past lessons.
We also have books in our library that help us to understand history, something that we've learned and something that we haven't learned, so we're knowing more from our books, and we can remember more from knowledge organizers and our recap on the lesson.
I enjoy learning about history because learning the past of Britain and the world shows us the struggles people went through and how privileged we are right now in the present.
I personally love it because in history we get to recap on what's happened in the past, and we can understand the suffering that people experienced, and we can bring it into our now time by respecting everybody with kindness instead of hurting or bullying them.